Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. D, and I am here with you on our Health Talk Tuesday. And this is going to be one of my favorite topics. Have you ever heard me talk about obesity before? Have you ever heard me talk about the importance of picking up heavy things and putting them back down again? If any of you have ever talked to me about how to lose weight, especially as you age, after you've had a baby, if you've had an injury and are just trying to get back to losing some weight, what do I always say? I'm going to need you to add some protein to your diet. They ask me often, postmenopausally, will I use TLS in a different way than I'm using it now? And I said, well, there's a good chance I'm going to recommend more protein than you've been getting before. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today, a deeper dive into metabolic health, a deeper dive into why we say with TLS, muscle dictates metabolism. We're going to talk about doing the heavy lifting. Let's do it together. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to take a deeper look at TLS Select and its approach to muscle dictates metabolism. So one of the things I'll often tell people is that you're not over fat, you're under muscled. And so we should talk about how to support your muscle growth, how we should support your longevity and your aging. So today I want to talk to you about how targeting fat, fitness, and function come together to help you meet your metabolic goals. We're going to focus on fat loss and the ability to keep it off, and we're going to do it through protein. What drives obesity? Now, we may say, especially me, as we look at nutrigenomics and personalized nutrition, that it's different for everybody, but there are some common threads: oxidative stress, inflammation, hormonal chaos. All of these things do come together in kind of this soup that we have to deal with, that soup that causes us to be overweight, obese, fatigued, overly tired with a foggy brain. So while we do agree that much of obesity today is caused by a genetic mismatch with our environment, meaning we don't run as much as we used to, we don't eat as clean as we used to, and at the end of the day, there's so much around us, abundance around us. We eat the wrong foods at the wrong time of the day. We eat the wrong amounts of food. And often we are not eating to our genetic potential. So when we think of this from an obesity perspective, and why I say, and TLS says, muscle dictates metabolism, is because it has to do with an energy reserve and how you're using an energy reserve as opposed to pushing on an energy storage, right? So when we think about that calories in, calories out, it's not a great net equation when we think about our kind of caveman DNA. We are used to running to get food, that there was some level of scarcity of food, and we exercised such a great deal. Well, today, as I said, there's such an abundance of energy about us and such a lack of fitness amongst us that we are not on the right side of this equation anymore. In an evolutionary blink, we have the same genetics yet a very different food and physical fitness environment. And weight gain is a multifactorial problem, right? Weight management requires a problem that is just as diverse. And I want to make it as simple as I can for you by simply using this word, stimulus. What kind of stimulus are you sending your brain? What kind of stimulus are you sending your liver? What kind of stimulus are you sending your white adipose tissue? And what kind of stimulus is it sending back? The most important stimulus I want to talk about today is that which comes from your muscles. Because we know today that if you want to lose fat, you will build your muscle. And so we're going to talk about the rules of weight loss. No one can lose weight if the hormones are not balanced. And I'm always going to have a little kicker. For every gimme, there's a gotcha, right? No one can lose weight if the hormones are not balanced, and no one can balance their hormones managing their sleep, if they are not managing their stress, and if they are not putting effort towards physical fitness and proper supplementation with protein. Liver support is one of the best ways to get our hormones in order. So I'll always start people with a detox when it comes to getting their hormones in a great place. And the purpose of doing this is I want to clean out the cellular debris. I want you to send the right signals. I need you to respond to the stimulus your body, your hormones, your muscles, and your fat are sending, right? So we're going to pay attention to rule number 6 and number 7, which is short and long cycles when it comes to female hormones matter, which is why we start with liver detoxification. Then we look at proper protein stimulation or proper protein abundance or sufficiency. And then from there, we want to make sure that you got the right micronutrient load, because methylation matters. Why is it so important to look at this? Well, mostly because we're dealing with people that in their 20s and 30s didn't really have any trouble losing weight, right? They didn't have any trouble dealing with weight and its concerns, or it didn't wreak havoc on them, right? You have a dozen people that come to you, maybe you're one of them, that said, just like I used to do. I'm not doing anything different, and I'm gaining weight. I'm putting extra inches or centimeters around my middle, my hips. And we don't know what went wrong, right? Well, part of it was food intake and energy expenditure changed. It changed due to hormones, both female and male. It often changes due to hormones related to sleep and to stress. And all of this together, the sleep that you are getting or you're not getting, the stress that you are getting or you're not managing is maybe a better way to do it, or the stimulus that you're getting from food and a lack of energy expenditure. All of these things change in the brain, your feeding center and your satiety center. Your hunger hormones change and your feeding hormones change. Now you may say, this is all the same information I'm used to getting from TLS. Am I learning anything new, right? What I want you to do is stand in a different place in the room and take a look at what we can do that can focus on that food intake versus energy expenditure, that disruption in the equation. What can we do that helps us support our feeding centers as well as our satiety centers, sleep and stress? It comes down to one big protein. I ruined my own punchline. It comes down to one macronutrient that does the heavy lifting. And that heavy lifting is done with protein, right? Because we have to appreciate that as we age, especially in as the female gender, that pregnancy will change our hormones, right? That age will change the way our body generates and uses. So this could be energy storage versus energy expenditure. That changes based on age. Of course, as hormones get disrupted in the perimenopausal or menopausal years, we have to pay attention to that. And stress and emotional factors will change the way a woman gains weight, but it also changes the way a man maintains muscle. So what is the common factor to all of these issues? Estrogen. For both men and women, the way we manage those hormones makes a huge difference. And like I said, the punchline that I ruined is that protein does the heavy lifting in making sure that we use our hormones successfully. So we do gain weight as we age. We see a decrease in hormones, in particular, some of our heightened metabolic hormones like thyroid hormone. And this is why I say estrogen and excess weight in both men and women disrupts our thyroid function. The hormone or fat itself is quite a productive endocrine organ, and part of what it is expressing is a lot of inflammation. But estrogen is also very rich communicator with fat, and so individuals that have excess weight also tend to be estrogen dominant. In men, this means that they don't metabolize estrogen as the way they should. And as women, it means they don't metabolize estrogen down to its ultimate end product. All of this leads to decreased thyroid function, increased adiposity, and a sense of lethargy, or a lack of thermogenesis, a lack of the ability to kind of up the amps on that ATP. We may see this exacerbates with sleep disturbances, or actually it's a question of chicken or the egg. Which one leads to the sleep disturbances, right? And we see this, as I said, in both men and in women. So the hormones that we do want go down, and the hormones that we don't want, they tend to go up. And this all leads to a sense of fatigue, which leads to a lack of physical activity. We see stress-related complaints go on the incline, and brain fatigue or cognitive dysfunction also go with it. So we tend to not be able to keep a handle on our brain. We tend to not be able to keep a handle on our weight. And that leads to we are no longer keeping a handle on our blood sugars, on our blood pressure, and ultimately we start to see metabolic decline. And the biggest harm here to us is that we think it's normal for a person our age. We think, well, this is just what I should expect with age, right? And so what I want to talk to you about is how we can kind of flip the script on what we think of today as normal metabolic aging and start talking about optimal metabolic aging. What are the mistakes that we make every day in obesity and aging, right? We starve ourselves to lose weight, which isn't increasing any kind of muscle reserve. It's not increasing any kind of endocrine reserve, and it's sure not helping feed, or what was that word? Stimulant, right? Stimulus is definitely not stimulating the body to go on a low calorie or a no calorie or skipping meals type of diet. We compare ourselves as women, we compare ourselves to other women, right? We become cardio bunnies, chug, 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 chug. We're going to get rid of this fat, right? And we're really not paying attention to the importance of bone and muscle. And its own stimulation for fat loss, its own stimulation for healthy brain volume, and ultimately for hormone regulation. There's a punchline here, you guys, and it starts with protein and muscle. One of the other mistakes I think that we make often in weight loss is that we don't give it enough time, or we leave no time for recovery. We just keep going at it, right? With no sense of recovery. And when we do that, we don't repair properly. And ultimately, this reserve that should protect our brain, protect our bones, protect our muscle, and ultimately protect our metabolism, we deplete or run through it very, very quickly. So these are my questions for you. If you want to lose weight, where's your protein? Where are your fat choices coming from? Where are your weights for strength training versus that cardio exercise? Where's your sleep routine? Are you going to bed at the same time each night? And are you waking up at the same time each morning? And have you scheduled in me time on your calendar? Are you also protecting yourself and your time? You know, one of the things that I think happens to us is that we often do well, you're not going to be surprised to hear this. What we often do is say, well, that's not going to happen to me. It's probably not the same for me. I eat well. I'm not sure we're really talking about me right now, right? So I just want to describe the obesogenic world that we live in. There are two things when we think of farming practices, right? Two of the worst things you can do to an animal is immobilize it and overfeed it. Does that sound like any world that you live in, or a world that one of your clients lives in, where they are immobilized in a cubby in a 9 to 5 and they are overfed, right? Now we could say that they're undermoved, they're under-exercised, and I'm going to say that they're understimulated. But at the end of the day, we live in a very obesogenic world that we have not paid attention to, right? We are outsourcing our exercise to an escalator, right? To conveyor belts we are not running the steps anymore. We're not doing a lot of our own work. We've kind of outsourced because of our technology. And as a result of that, we are lacking very important stimulus. Even for people that tell me that they are eating well, they are often eating poorly with a lack, and what I mean by that is a lack of stimulation to their brain and to their muscle. So I want to change the script. What are some of the important topics we need to discuss? Protein, you're not getting enough. If your goal is to lose fat, you need to increase muscle synthesis. And if your goal is to increase muscle synthesis, you need to increase or apply stimulus to your muscles, to your bones, to your brain. If you want to respond to that stimulus, you better increase your protein intake. And it needs to be high quality protein, because the amino acid profile of protein matters. Not all proteins are created equal. Not all amino acids are created equal or do the same thing in the body. Muscle building. Now, let's ask that important question. Is it true that you need to break down muscle to build muscle? By and large, we could say yes as a general answer. But one of the things I think is more important to pay attention to is the energy, the stimulus it takes to build muscle. And the reason why I put that out there isn't to discourage you from working out. Quite the opposite. It's not to tell you that you're not working out hard enough. It is to remind you that if you're not working out, you're not gaining, you're losing, because it takes a lot of energy to build muscle. That energy comes in the form of amino acids. It takes energy, stimulus is what I'm talking about, to maintain that. Fat storage is passive. It takes very little energy to do that. So I have to ask you an important question when it comes to holding on to your brain function, when it comes to holding on to your lean muscle mass, when it comes to holding on to your bone mass. Are you on the positive side or the negative side? Meaning, are you at a deficit or are you running ahead of the game when it comes to stress? Because that is depleting your reserve. That is taking energy that would otherwise be building your brain, be building your bones, be building your muscle, which means you need to have a higher commitment to protein in your diet. When it comes to the stimulation, exercise, which side of the coin are you on, right? Because we need to be applying stimulus. We need to be moving under load to create healthy lean muscle mass, to be able to create healthy brains or maintain healthy brain volume as we age. We need to be stimulating our muscles for us to be able to maintain that hormonal balance that allows you to have a healthy whittled middle, for you to be able to have functional movement and support that functional movement without injury, right? We need this stimulation to support your brain as you age. Where are you at on the sleep continuum? And how consistently are you able to run your program? And when I say run your program, there's a lot of people that will tell me Monday through Friday, they feel like they are doing okay, right? And then they let everything go on the weekend and they come back and they're going to get on their diet again on Monday. So the stimulation that they're giving is somewhat chaotic. So we want to really break it down into, if I'm going to make this simple, what are the two things that I need you to do? I need you to up your protein and I need you to up your strength training. I need you to move more functionally, even if what we're moving is your body naturally. This does not require a CrossFit commitment. What this requires is for you to move your mass, right? When we think of skeletal health, when we think about this endocrine organ, your muscle, right? And it stimulates, maintains healthy blood pressure, healthy blood glucose. It stimulates because it communicates as an endocrine organ. It stimulates your brain's production and fat loss. Skeletal muscle is the organ that counteracts fat. There are three predictors of health today. See, often in the past as physicians have looked at things like your total cholesterol, right? Your hemoglobin A1C, complete blood count. And while those have their place in medicine, a much better predictor of health is leg strength, your VO2 max, and lean muscle mass. These are considered your 3 top predictors of health. I want to describe to you exactly why this is the new look or perspective in medicine. That leg strength is that quality of movement, that ability to be resistant to illness because of balance, agility, power, strength, speed. These are the things that we get from leg strength. VO2 max, as we think of strength equals endurance. We think of respiratory, what's referred to as a physiologic headroom, right? The difference here of having high physiology, having high stimulation potential, and here at the bottom, this is death. And we want the space between these two to be significant. And what happens with age and a lack of leg strength, a lack of bone mineral density, a lack of healthy endocrine function, a lack of proper stimulation to maintain this physiologic headroom, we start to see the space between my life and quality of life today and death get shorter and shorter, or the space between get less and less. So predictors of health: leg strength, VO2 max, and lean muscle mass is what increases or maintains this physiologic headroom. When we see your LDLs go up, when we see, and I want these to be in healthy ranges, don't get me wrong, but when we see what actually makes a difference between here and here, it is not your LDLs, it is not your hemoglobin A1C. It is something completely different measured through muscle and stimulation. And that's what we're talking about today. Your muscle is a reserve. And the idea here, when we think of longevity, is adaptation. Right now, you may be thinking of adaptation in the very acute sense, the today sense, which is, can I catch myself if I'm going to fall? That's a level of adaptation, or that's a measure of adaptation. Is also a measure of your reaction time, your agility, your power, and that muscular strength. Your ability to do that has everything to do with the health of the muscle and the reserve. Or that concept that your muscle is a reserve, that it is there, quote unquote, should you need it, right? We have to ask ourselves, what is a max effort? And understand that this is part of that question of physiologic headroom, that concept of it gets harder to do things as we age. Well, it gets harder to do things as you lose lean muscle mass, right? So when we think of the woman in front of you and what she's lifting, that for many would be a max effort. Now, what I want you to do is think about the last time. I want you to think about where you are right now, right, and your heart rate. And if you were to measure your heart rate, what would be happening, right? Then I want you to think of the last time you exercised and what happened to your heart rate. Right? It went up, right? Now, I want you to think now about your lifting a car, lifting something ridiculously heavy, right? And what do? Like all of you just now, when I said lift a car, pick it up by its bumper, lift something incredibly heavy. Imagine the woman in front of you, right? She did a Valsalva. Right? That's what she did. And her heart rate went up. And the same thing happened with you when you thought about the last time that you exercised. Your heart rate went up. If you lifted something heavy, you can remember viscerally what that felt like. And your heart rate went up. And that was your max effort. Now I want you to think of aging. And I want you to think of someone that's not infirmed, but older. And that for them, getting up off of the toilet is a max effort. Doing stairs is a max effort. It is not, in fact, what you just imagined the last time you worked out. It is, in fact, a regular daily activity that for some, in the absence of lean muscle mass, in the absence of having a reservoir in the muscle, a reserve, a savings account, spontaneous activity throughout the day is an all-out effort. This is why we see people in the elderly stay in a chair and watch TV all day. This is why we see disruption to hormones. This is why we see weight gain. This is why we see dementia. This is why. Because spontaneous activity stops. Because muscle reserves are not there. Energy is not there. This idea of a muscle reserve, I need you to start thinking of it as your energy reserve, because that's what your muscles are doing for you. Everything is made from protein. Your hair, your skin, your nails, your hormone receptors, your immune system. It all comes from a profile of amino acids that strung together make proteins. And it is absolutely essential that you have an appropriate amino acid pool and an appropriate muscle reserve. So when we think of this concept of physiologic headroom, I want you to think of a varied approach to your physical fitness and a varied approach to your protein consumption, because women are disproportionately affected by this reduction in lean muscle mass, this hormone chaos or this hormonal milieu, right? That we lack this vascular reserve without a sufficient stimulation. Medicines that we take through later decades of life deplete or have a significant effect on muscle health or that muscle reserve. So we need to up our game on resistance, strength and endurance, and ultimately power. Power is the idea of lifting up something very heavy and doing it very quickly. So it's really speed and strength together. And those that are strong also have better physiologic headroom and endurance, right? They have a reserve. They can bob and weave. They are physically fit or resistant to illness. The problem that we need to get over as women and as men, as the young and the more mature, is that we look at health in a very binary way. She's fat, she's not fat. Oh, then she's healthy, she's not healthy, right? We live in a world where we are fat obsessed. We are not strength or metabolically obsessed. And what I mean by that is that we don't think about what supports metabolism, right? We think more about that outward appearance, which is why we can talk about skin, hair, and nails and protein consumption, because what motivates. What I want us to do is go one step further, a little bit deeper dive into this idea of muscle dictates metabolism. That should say skinny, not skin. Skinny versus strength, right? You've heard it that strong is the new skinny, but this is a paradigm shift that we need to bring people into, right? This is something we need to pull people into, because unfortunately, what's happened in an effort to change people's saturated fat consumption, we've changed the story on protein consumption. And muscle is an endocrine tissue. It is an organ that dictates the way fat behaves. It is a reservoir or an organ that dictates power, strength, and the importance of being, and things as important as being able to get up off of a toilet when you're 92 all by yourself. The problem is we're starting to see a younger and younger population be dynapenic, meaning that they don't have strength or power or that speed of strength. We see then a loss of cognitive function in a younger and younger population because they are not getting that brain stimulation. Now, there are things that we can do that marry well with creating a healthy hormone reserve, a healthy amino acid pool. And those are things like chlorogenic acid that is naturally part of blueberries, egalic acid that's naturally part of blue and purple berries that have that, like that very robust purple and blue colors. This is where we get chlorogenic acid. This is where we get egalic acid. Now, those are very beneficial for brain function. Those are some ways that we can take the individual that is poorly compensated and kind of help give them the stimulus from metabolically to kind of move in that direction. If kind of replace that endurance when the person is under strong, right? Then we can try to do something about that endurance component and that strength component through supplementation, the first of which is going to be protein supplementation. But it's important to know that we need to start earlier with individuals. We need to not wait until we are perimenopausal or postmenopausal to start thinking about this energy reserve. It's most important that we start having a conversation about calories in and calories out, right? Is it true that just like you need to break down muscle to build muscle, you need to apply a stimulus to be able to get some benefit from that energy output, right? And that it takes less energy to store fat? That is true, right? While it's far more complex underneath the iceberg, right? Underneath the water where the iceberg sits, it's okay for us to talk about it like that. Calories in and calories out. Is it as simple as that? No, it's far more complex than that. But at the same time, let's move away from arguing about who's right and who's wrong and start thinking about eating in a more patient-centric way. Quality of protein, quality of their day, quality of their sleep, because more than those calories matter, right? And so we want to start thinking about where does the stimulation come from? Is there an amino acid or protein pool that is sufficient enough to help me be resistant to disease, whether it's blood sugar concerns or blood pressure concerns or just premature aging concerns, right? And am I applying pressure in the appropriate other buckets that I need to, where there's more me time, there's more stress relief, there is more access to quality sleep and quality interactions. All of this matters. So when we think about the dietary protein, we're going to think about that quality of protein and where it comes from, right? Because right now your body is keeping you healthy, but it is literally fighting for resources. And it is this amino acid pool that is that reserve that we're referring to as fitness. In an absence of a protein amino acid pool, you will increase your visceral fat. You will have a weakened immune system. You will see decreased cognitive function and a lack of appropriate cognitive stimulation. You will have weakened bones and you will ultimately have weakened muscles. And that's where the cycle begins again, where weakened muscles will only lead to higher potential for visceral adiposity, a weakened immune system, and ultimately endocrine system, decreased cognitive function due to lack of stimulation, due to inadequate muscle to make that stimulation. And now we're back to poor bone health, right? So we've been asking the calorie question for years because dietary recommendations, as I said, are heavily weighted towards low fat or low saturated fat. We find that people end up avoiding appropriate amounts of protein, and intakes of protein sources have taken a dramatic decline. And this is not the way to achieve better metabolic function, better weight loss, better brain function. And it is of critical importance that we pay attention to this lack of protein when we think of healthy aging and longevity. It is critical when we ask, I'm not saying it's not important to ask the calorie question or the quality question. I'm just saying it's critical that when we ask this question, that we don't expect major changes in metabolism when we treat protein as protein. That is simply a misunderstanding of the way protein works, the orchestration or the symphony of amino acids. If you don't understand that symphony, right, then you don't understand how hormones are made, and then ultimately what impacts them: sleep, fitness, stress, gender, and then an epigenetic environment. So let's talk about calories in and calories out, but let's also make sure that we're talking about other medical changes in metabolism and get people to start engaging in healthy behaviors. The first stop to that first step in that healthy behavior talk is to talk to people about quality of protein and sourcing of protein. If they are a plant-based eater, because this isn't an argument for meat-based eating, it is an argument for really understanding the amino acid pool that comes from peas and legumes, right? Nuts and other plant sources, so that we can make sure that we're getting a sufficient amount to meet our metabolic need, and that we are creating a pool of amino acids that will allow your brain to be healthy, allow your hormones to be balanced, allow your body to detoxify, and ultimately for you to be able to meet the challenge, right, of a metabolic stimulus. You can either be on the wrong side or the right side of blood pressure. The answer is in your amino acid pool and your physical fitness. You can be on the wrong side or the right side of an immune disruptor. And the answer is in your amino acid pool and your fitness regimen, right? You can be on the wrong side or the right side of blood sugar. And the answer is, yep, you guessed it, in your amino acid pool and the stimulation that you put towards your muscles and therefore your hormones. Now, I get it. It's gotten very confusing over the last handful of years, right? Do I eat frequent meals? Do I intermittent fast? I've heard that one meal a day is good for some people, right? And so while much of the answer to this is in your genetic blueprint, at the end of the day, the conversation doesn't need to be an if this, then that, or this or that. What I think people get confused with frequent meals versus intermittent fasting is that they think that intermittent fasting is the same thing as skipping meals. So your body is an amazing machine. And in the absence of calories, in the absence of carbohydrates in particular, your body's preferred fuel source, it will shift itself to grab fatty acids so that your brain will continue to work, so that you are able to support your endocrine system and energy output. And so there's a difference between frequent meals that are of high quality, right, and skipping meals, which is simply skipping a meal and not feeding yourself and putting your body into hormonal chaos. When you intermittent fast, which means you're going greater than often 14, as much as 18, and most commonly 16 hours without food, what you've done is you've shifted energy partitioning. You've shifted the body to say, she is not consuming calories now, so I now need to go to this reserve over here. Does it make sense why there's a difference between skipping a meal and intermittent fasting? When you skip a meal, your body never got it's that magic word again, stimulus, that it needed to shift its energy partitioning. Instead, it just got the message that you have a craving, and or that your satiety centers and your feeding centers have been disrupted. You may be overly stressed, which means you're going to make poor food choices. Maybe the reason why you're skipping a meal is because of stuff that came up during the day, right? Which means you're going to make poor food choices. But you've never, more importantly, reached that point metabolically where you are partitioning and looking for energy somewhere else. So there's frequent meals that are high quality, that give you the protein that you need, right? Often we find people that are eating for muscle growth are eating like it's their job, right? And then there are those that have fantastic success by partitioning energy in a very different way, by intermittent fasting. The mistake that most people make is the mistake that we talked about a moment ago, where people starve themselves, right? But they don't actually follow a program that is metabolically sound. They simply go without meals. They simply go without food and then make mistakes with food choices, right? They try to work out very, very hard, but then don't end up replacing their amino acid pool with the food that it needs or the energy that it needs. Remember, we're going to use protein and energy and muscle all together. So these are the mistakes that people make. And that is the difference between the confusion that so many people have around intermittent fasting versus frequent small meals, right? Now, I think it's important for us to also look at the research, not just what works for an individual, right? Because what we do know is like hitting it right down the middle doesn't work for anybody, right? Where we try to reduce calories by a fantastic amount. We may be eating frequently, but we've really reduced those calories, which means the body never feels fed. It never gets those satiety centers in the brain, never get dealt with. And often due to calorie restriction, we never replace the amino acid pool that we are supposed to. But what maybe we should look at, besides what works for people, is to understand what the literature says. And numerous trials show that in the short and intermediate and even long term, that there's roughly no difference in weight loss between the very low carb eater, the moderately low carb eater, and the very low fat and the moderately low fat dietary intakes. So what we know is that carb and fat are less important than that protein. What we know is that you can eat on either side of the scale as long as you are getting a sufficient amount of protein. And that's why I say metabolically, right? From an immune standpoint, from a weight loss standpoint, from a hormonal standpoint, from an endocrine standpoint, protein wears the pants. So what does your core program look like, right? Well, it is low glycemic impact eating with a sufficient amount of protein. If you can work with a practitioner to understand more about your fat-free mass or your lean muscle mass, you'll get a better idea about one of those indications of longevity or predictor of long-term health. Body weight squats, body work, plyometrics. These are all things that I want you to start thinking about incorporating into your day, because it is in fact that glycolytic, that jump, that kind of activity, what we call plyometrics, right? That burst of energy, that power, energy, that speed. That is what I want you to start thinking about so that you can meet that next component of health. Right? And then I need you to start thinking about behavior modification, taking that inventory. How do you deal with stress? How do you deal with sleep hygiene, right? Are you sleeping well? Understanding your own unique insulation factors. Are you someone that is skipping meals? Are you a cardio bunny? Are you not? Have you, in the effort to cut out fat, have you also cut out protein from your diet? From there, we're going to appreciate where you're at in body composition and if it's beneficial to use supplementation to kind of repair metabolism. The first step I have to help you repair your metabolism is to repair your sleep habits and your stress habits. So using anti-stress botanicals, using anti-stress minerals, or vitamins, B vitamins, magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids. These are your nutritional adaptogens. I want you to start thinking about those. If you need something more powerful, there are adaptogens like ashwagandha, like holy basil, like rhodiola, like L-theanine. These are all botanicals that we call adaptogens or nervines, and they can be helpful to reset metabolism, to restore healthy metabolism, or what we could refer to as recovery potential. And then you are going to start to respond much better to the dietary stimulation and obviously the physical stimulation, right? So what is the next thing that we want to pay attention to? Eat clean. I like to tell people to eat clean and play dirty. You need to get out into nature, right? So eating clean is the key. And so if you are going, so I always want you to start your day with protein. A lot of people choose to start their day with carbohydrates, And that is not the best way to break a fast, right? Now, we are not talking about a prolonged fast here. We're talking about you went to bed, right? You stopped eating at 7. You didn't eat later than 7 p.m. Some very easy steps you can take to healthy eating practices and knowing that you're eating at the right time of the day is if it's not light outside, don't eat, right? So I realized that as we move into summer months, we have light into later hours. I can appreciate that. But one of the key rules is that we can follow, rules that we can have people follow is as the light starts to go down, our eating habits we need to stop eating after hours or when the lamp lights come on, right? We need to make sure that we get sufficient fat, adequate protein for our gender, our activity level, and the weight we are right now, right? When it comes to a low, simple carb diet, what I'm talking about is that we're going to cut out those simple foods like the grains, the breads, the pastas, right? For some people, this goes as far as limiting the amount of fruit. If you find yourself carbohydrate sensitive, one of the ways you know if you're carbohydrate sensitive is that you become very somnolent after eating. You want to fall asleep. That is a time that I would say, let's go ahead and limit how much sugar you're getting even from fruits. And we're going to shift your carbohydrates to vegetables. The key is adequate protein. Too much protein can decrease estrogen metabolism. And that's why I say it needs to be an appropriate amount for the size you are now, for your gender, for your activity level. And there are great graphs or charts is a better way to put it that you can use to identify the best number of grams per protein for body weight for you based on activity level. Train smart, lift heavy. Now, what I'm talking about there is compound lifts that you can hit major muscles, right? And this is why we focus a lot with predictors of health on leg strength, because the squat is one of a body weight squat or a weighted squat, a front squat, is one of the ways that you can be moving under load and get an all over body stimulation, including that of the brain. Sprinting short bursts, all out effort, right? So we're going to do this a couple times a week where you're going to do several bursts of greater than 10-second bouts, but less than 20 seconds, roughly about that 10 to 20 second mark of all out effort. Now I understand for some people, just getting that 9, 10 would be enough for them, right? It's all about progress and measuring that progress. And you're just going to keep moving up that scale until you can do more sprints and more sprints. Make sure that you are allowing adequate rest between exercise sessions. I don't need you in the gym 7 days a week, right? There's a great deal of evidence behind making sure that you don't get that we focus on more of a volume rather than a focus on soreness. Nobody got bigger because they got sore. All they did is stay out of the gym longer, right? So what we want to be able to do is that measurement of soreness is a measurement that you did break something down and therefore there was potential for growth, right? But no one that was on the sore scale at 8s and 9s out of 10 was doing anything other than either deciding that exercise wasn't for them or having to stay out of the gym until they had recovered well enough to go back to the gym. In the meantime, the person that did not get overly sore has done 2 or 3 more workouts than that other individual and probably was able to increase the volume of their work. And so we really want to think about what matters and do math in a very different way than we have been doing it, right? Very often we do not want to go into a gym, especially if we're coming back to the gym after having been athletic or physically fit or having that level of physical conditioning at some point in our life. And we just can't see ourselves with a small weight in our hand or a small lifts or not really going all out. I just want us to really think about what matters, and that volume might matter more than the weight on that initial lift, right? When we think about the blueprint for better performance in both men and women, eat clean, train smart, get some sleep, get more vitamin D. That means going outside or getting a vitamin D supplement and making sure that you're getting enough protein. That's the top 5 for repairing your metabolism. When it comes to getting more sleep, too many of us are trying to get by on only 6 hours. I need you to go for that 7.5-hour mark. Some of you will see fantastic metabolic potential at that 9-hour mark, right? What I'm going to suggest you do is get up early and also go to bed early. That tends to be something that matches many of the neurohormones that control feeding centers. That's how we manage many of the hormones that dictate metabolism and ultimately aging, right? Sleep deprivation, all that's doing for you is making you less productive the next day and raising your stress hormones. And when noradrenaline and cortisol go up, adenosine and melatonin, sleep hormones, go down. That leads to increased visceral adiposity. And now we are depleting a reserve of our muscle, right? So we need to start thinking about stimulation in a different way, right? Where we're now repairing or recovering the nervous system so that we don't end up having on one side a lack of physical movement that limits our immunity, a lack of protein that limits our immunity, and now a stress cascade that limits our immunity and makes it impossible for us to manage inflammatory cascades. When we think about inflammatory diets, I think we often forget that lifestyle also increases. It's enough to change your diet. I can appreciate that. But I think we also forget how some of our lifestyle choices are also pro-inflammatory. And this is why it's absolutely critical that you get enough sleep, because sleep also, lack of sleep or sleep deprivation increases inflammation. When we think about getting more protein, what we're really talking about is giving you back that energy pool. And remember, it's energy that we're talking about so that we can increase muscle synthesis, so that we can maintain that lean muscle mass, which is a predictor of age or predictor of health, that we can maintain bone mass, and that we can maintain volume or brain mass. These are all critically important for us to be able to manage our blood sugars, manage our blood pressure, and ultimately manage ourselves for healthy aging. Why vitamin D? Because low vitamin D is correlated with that hormonal chaos or that hormonal milieu, like low levels of testosterone, a risk for low thyroid function. Women are often confused why I'll focus on fitness, strength training, and testosterone, right? And it has a great deal to do with what testosterone does in relationship to not just lean muscle mass and bone mass, but also its importance when it comes to balance of stress hormones and being able to have an engagement with our sex hormones, right? So we're looking at get more vitamin D. And vitamin D is one of the ways, in addition to better sleep, that we're able to manage these stress hormones and sex hormones. And that's why I'll talk about testosterone. 30 to 60 minutes of sun per day, definitely supplement with a vitamin D. You're looking to get your vitamin D levels at the 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. When it comes to healthy eating, it is not about low calorie, it is not about low carb, and it is not about low fat. It is about sufficient protein and good complex carbohydrates that can feed the gut biota. When you feed a healthy gut, you don't just have a healthy brain, you have a healthy heart, and you have a healthy metabolism. Your gut biota can be another one of these discussions about why do we not lose weight? Well, if you have an unhealthy gut or the biota in the gut are unhealthy, it is far more difficult for you to lose weight. And so we've learned a couple things today that when it comes to healthy weight management, body composition, longevity, and aging, we need to focus on the quality of your protein. We need to focus on the quality of your detoxification potential. And our next topic may just be the quality of your gut bugs, right? And how to supplement for better cardiovascular function and weight loss. Finally, it's important to remember that supplements should be used in addition to a healthy diet, not as antidotes to a poor diet or a poor lifestyle or an excuse to get food out of a window. If used properly, there's significant scientific strength behind the use of supplementation as an adjunct to healthy sleep, healthy exercise, and a healthy diet. When we think about why this is so powerful, is because the trends of health are moving and more people are looking towards the evidence of complementary and alternative or lifestyle choices over those of medication. We just know if you're trying to lose weight, you need to do something different than you've been doing, and you need the TLS Select Weight Loss Program. Thank you again for spending Health Talk Tuesdays with me, Dr. D. We will see you back here next week at 2 p.m. to talk about Eastern Daylight Time to talk about the health of your sleep. Until then, go be healthy, go be brilliant.